Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Interpreting in Healthcare, the podcast put out by the Standards and Training Committee of the National Council on Interpreting in Healthcare. Today, I have a very special guest for you, someone that, as a working interpreter, you're going to be really excited to meet because she's done it all, starting from the bottom and working her way to the top, something I really admire. Our guest today is Catalina Natalini, who has always been passionate about languages and literature. She has a master's in English linguistics and literature from the University of Zurich in Switzerland. Catalina has always loved teaching, beginning her teaching career as a language teacher and evolving to adjunct professor in the Masters of Translation and Interpretation program at LaSalle University. She has ample experience in curriculum development at the graduate level. She is the creator of the Interpreter Success Academy by Magna Voce, where she is the lead teacher and CEO. Here, she applies her experience and expertise to support interpreters with mastery of interpretation so that they can have fulfilling and profitable careers. Her career as an interpreter started in 2004 in the legal, medical, and school settings. She has supported the profession in her roles as interpreter representative to the Delaware Court Interpreter Advisory Board and as a Delaware State Chair for IMIA, International Medical Interpreters Association. Her website is www.magnavoceie.com. And like me, when she's not interpreting or teaching interpretation, Catalina sits in meditation or in her garden relaxing. And for me, that would be sitting with a good book in the garden. Welcome, Catalina. Good to have you on the program.
Eliana, I am very happy that we can get together and have this conversation today.
Equally so. So we have, as I mentioned, similar backgrounds in that we've worked as interpreters, then we became interpreter trainers. We pursued advanced degrees in the study of linguistics or interpretation or teaching of a second language. We started our own business. We've held positions of responsibility. We create curricula to train interpreters. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you a question about looking back to when you got started till today. That's over 20 years. What stands out? Something that either motivated you to make a switch in your career path or that resonated with you to tell you, yes, this is what I was meant to do? Tell us about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, my career of 17 years as an interpreter has opened many doors to me. And those doors were opened through collaborations. It was never on my own. There was always somebody there that kind of gave me that little nudge to move forward and to try something different and to take a little bit onto the adventure of becoming an interpreter and then a trainer, and then later on now as a teacher of interpretation in my own business. And at that time, back in 2007, when I got certified, I could have never imagined all the places this profession was going to take me and to all the connections and collaborations that were going to be created on my path, being an interpreter. And I got certified when I was 41 when I got certified. So I was not a young chick anymore. I was a mature woman. I had 2 little children with me. And as I look back, a lot of people say, you're such a good interpreter. You should have started interpreting earlier, right? And I always feel like, no, I did start interpreting. I became an interpreter at the right time in my life. When I was 41, and I had not a whole lot, but quite a lot life experience.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you agree with me on this, but life experience is so important for our work as interpreters. Like I look at myself when I was in my 20s, and I was like, no, I was so immature. And there were so many things I could not have been able to understand emotionally or psychologically. Maybe intellectually, yeah, maybe I would have been able to do it. But there is more to what we do, more than just the intellectual part. There's an emotional part, the
That's what
psychological
worries
part.
me about the introduction of AI to interpreting,
Mhm.
because I feel
Mhm.
like it would be so valuable, but people aren't willing to look at what it can't yet
Mhm.
do. Why can't we look at what it is very good at doing, right? So a dictionary match, an apple, and then the word equivalent
Mhm.
for an apple. Couldn't we have AI explain the menu to a
Yeah.
patient in their language and be able to describe the dish and the ingredients that go in and the components and how much fat and how many carbohydrates? All of that is good because it's invariable and
Mhm.
requires no emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
That's what I think developers aren't willing to look at. So much of
Yes.
communication,
Yes.
particularly in the court or in the hospital,
Yeah.
is very impactful to that person's life. There are a lot of emotions swirling about, a lot of things influence the communication, so that you have to be attuned, and you
Yes.
also have to have that internal
Mhm.
life experience, emotional intelligence. If you're immature, you're not going to be as good as an interpreter as a mature interpreter, precisely for that reason. We don't want to escalate a
Yeah.
situation. We want to help
Exactly.
communication. So why
Yes.
can't we have this discussions with the people that are developing AI right
Yes.
now,
Mhm.
instead of complaining about why it's not working the way that we want it to work later? I don't know.
Yes, that is so important what you just said, and it brings me back to what I was saying about collaborations, right? Because that's how we grow. We cannot grow without collaboration, right? We cannot grow in any sense in our life if we don't have someone or something that we can rely on and that can expand our vision, our vision. And going back to your question, what I'm most proud of, I am so proud of all the connections and the people I have met, the connections that I have forged as an interpreter in my career of these 17 years, because they were all there at the right time, right? Just when it was needed for me to move to the next step in my career and my profession. And the same with people, the same is with technology. It comes to us at a time in which we are invited to move to the next level, to the next step of giving our services in a better way, in an easier way, right? So we have to appreciate that part of it, that it's going to make it in many ways easier for us. And
Yes,
why not take the invitation,
I
right?
don't want to be one of those people who, just because it's new and it's unfamiliar, I reject it. I want to examine it and see how can it really be useful, but we have to keep patient safety in mind. That's first, right?
Yes.
So, and part of that is building trust, which I'm
Mhm.
sure someday robots and AI will be able to discern emotions, but right now they're like neurodivergent people. They can't really take the emotional
Mhm.
temperature in the room. So why can't we just acknowledge that and use it as a tool to support our performance and help improve the tool so that it can continue to do more? But I
Yeah.
don't like seeing the advertisements that say, install this app and you'll never have to use an interpreter or translator again. It can do
Mhm.
everything for you. Or maybe someday, but not today yet.
Not
No one's
today.
given that to me
Yeah.
yet.
Those ideas of replacing what a human is are a little bit like shaky. I came into the profession around 2007, and already someone has said about 10 or 20 years ago at that time that by 2000, all translators will have been replaced. There will not be more translators. And yet,
Here we are.
right now, as we're speaking, lots of people are making good money being translators, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think you are right. It's important not to be scared, not to be resistant, not to reject, but to open to ask ourselves, how can this make my work faster, better, easier, so that I can serve better?
Absolutely agree with you 100%. There's lots of things I think that the new technology could do now, freeing up the human interpreter for those more nuanced, more difficult, more, emotionally explosive types of encounters, whether they're end of life or in the emergency room or giving patients bad news or there's so many mental health, behavioral health, but it could support us in a lot of ways now. It can give directions very well, right? Because that's unchanging and there's no emotional content. How do I find the parking lot? Where do I go to find such and such clinic? You could almost, like with those restaurants, when they say your table's ready and it buzzes in your hand, you could almost hand out something that would speak the directions to somebody, whether they're visually impaired or don't speak English to understand the signage. I think there's a lot that we could do to improve patient experience and
That's
take
right.
those smaller, and I don't mean to make it seem unimportant, but some of those smaller interpreting requests could be taken off that worksheet, and then the interpreter could stay longer with somebody in recovery or
Yeah,
explain something to the family or walk them to where they need to go.
absolutely. Because you're right. Because then we can save our energy for things that are draining and that demand so much of us psychologically and emotionally. We can save our energy for that,
Yep.
for those moments when we are in situations in which they are demanding to us, not just intellectually but also emotionally.
I remember when there was no budget to translate at the pharmacy. Now the pharmacy, we have a contract, or the hospital can print the directions on the label in Spanish and
Wow.
other languages. But back then they couldn't, and the patient's going to pick up their medicine now. So if you put a translation request into interpreter services, that usually gets worked on during downtime. It's not going to happen in the next 15 or 20 minutes. But I remember buying, as an interpreter, those greeting cards that you could record your message
Oh,
at a dollar store,
that's ingenious.
and I had them in my bag, and I could open the card and speak the instructions. The lisinopril needs to be taken at this time, this medication take with food at lunchtime, blah, blah, blah. So
Wow,
they could open the card and hear
how
the
ingenious.
instructions again. Sometimes, depending on the educational level of the patient, you could take one of each pill and use Scotch tape on the inside with the name next to it so they knew which is which, and then have those audio directions again. And how
Super
long ago
ingenious.
was that? That was forever ago. That was before AI.
Mm,
So technology has always been available for us, and it continues to get better, right? A lot of people resisted what we're doing right now, the video connection, but
yeah,
that has brought languages of limited diffusion, as well as rural isolated populations, the ability to have telehealth with an interpreter.
which
So
is
so
which is
much
great,
good.
right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There is so much good in it, and if we just could only be open and flexible, how much easier it will be for us, for everybody, right?
So looking at the current situation, what's happening now with the
Mhm.
availability of training for interpreters, much more widespread now than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
With the introduction of AI into interpreting and translating, like we've been discussing, with the job market, with a lot of language service providers sourcing their interpreter staff who live abroad so that they can pay out less in salary, which is a way to make the business successful. But what does that do to interpreters here in the US? I mean, there's a lot going on in our field. When you look at the current situation right now, what sticks out to you as something that either you feel we need to work on or that you're excited about seeing how it's going to turn out? I mean, that even includes elections, right? We either will have continuing Section 1557 and Affordable Care Act, or that could all go away. So there's a lot happening lately.
There's a lot of happening. And I think what I'm excited about, and this I've seen in the years that I've been working as an interpreter and the years that I've been teaching, is how the profession has grown stronger, right? Like nowadays you say interpreter and people kind of know, they know what it is. They really have an idea of what that is. And also the opportunities for educating ourselves to keep our, our growth, to keep with our learning and our growth that were not there back in, I say, 2004, when I started looking into being an interpreter. I remember I was looking for a place where can I go? And there were a couple of places that were super far away from my home. And that was all there was, right? There was nothing that could give you a systematic structure path to learn interpretation, right? And that has changed. And I think that that's something that I'm really excited about because I am a teacher. and I've seen the growth in that area. There are now many people teaching interpretation, many amazing teachers and trainers out there teaching interpretation in different forms and in different ways. And I think I'm excited about that because the more the group of people who are teaching increases, and the more there's also people writing about the profession, the more this baggage of knowledge in interpretation grows, and the more appreciation there is for the profession as an academic discipline. And that, to me, is exciting. I started teaching like in 2009, and at the beginning, the only thing that I would teach would be continuing education courses. That's how I started teaching. So in the last 2 years, within my business, I've been restructuring everything in a sense that I want to bring under one umbrella all the different type of teaching I've been doing. And last year we have for the first time a 1-year-long program for interpreters who want to become interpreters and move into certification. So it was very exciting. So that's one type of course. The continuing education is another track. And then we have a baby membership, academic membership for interpreters as well that we've been going to be promoting this fall. So my work for the last 2 years has been trying to restructure everything under one umbrella and standardize my methodology so that I can continue teaching these programs and I can continue supporting professional interpreters, those who are certified, who need to maintain their skills and need to continue growing as interpreters and professionals, and those who are new to the profession, who need to learn about interpretation and need to get the credentialing. So to me, it's a great joy to be in this moment, at this time in my life and at this time in our lives, where this is possible and when this is really a thing, right? Becoming an interpreter is a thing. It's not something that we do because we don't do something else, right? We have a lot of people now being committed to being interpreters and to not to be just interpreters, to be great, amazing interpreters, to learn what they need to learn, to get the credentials, and to make a living doing something that they love. And I think that is so exciting and that is so beautiful. And I am so thrilled to be part of it, really thrilled to be part of it.
Likewise, seeing the number of students increase each year and the diversity, not just in the languages spoken, right? Originally, I used to get a lot of Spanish, English, heritage Spanish speakers to train as interpreters. Now I get people from all over the world, some of whom were physicians or nurses or allied healthcare professionals in their country of origin. The discussions in class are so interesting.
Yes.
And I get so much, I feel like I learn so much from my students that I'm getting the
Mhm.
better part of the deal in a way. But at the same time, I'm also really happy to be part of a program. I teach a 120-hour um, introduction to professional healthcare interpreting that needs to be expanded, I think, to a full year to get people ready to then leave the program, sit for the national certification exam, pass,
Mhm.
ground running, rather than being frightened on day one of assignment one of, oh, can I do this? They should go in with the certainty that we've practiced all the skills. I've gotten feedback and coaching. I understand my guidelines and my standards and my code of ethics. And I've got the lab time. I've got
Mhm.
the dialogue practice time. I've got the memory skills building, like the confidence that people have because they've seen for themselves that they have improved. That
Mhm.
is something money can't buy. It really
That's
makes you
right.
stand up straight.
Yes. And that confidence is so important to be a professional. You need that confidence. And you can tell when an interpreter is confident and when an interpreter is not. And it
Yes,
makes a huge difference. And
yes.
now, as we are speaking, you and I were speaking and we are talking about what we've done and all the things that we have in common, how we've been interpreters, how we've become teachers of interpretation. I'm sure that so many people are listening to us and saying, oh, that could be me. And yes,
Exactly.
that could be
Exactly.
you
It could be
too.
you.
Yes.
Get that extra training, get that advanced
Yes,
degree. You can do
exactly.
this
If you love the profession and you want more, teaching is always an option and it's a beautiful path because you are leading others into doing into going into profession and doing a service that is fantastic. I mean, it's phenomenal, right? Being an interpreter, I love being an interpreter, always have. So I think it's inspiring to others, right, to see what the possibilities are.
And I think that leads directly into the last question, which is looking ahead towards the future. What would you like to see happen? Ideally for me, I would like to see more hiring of staff interpreters in the courts, in the schools, in the hospitals, rather than getting rid of the department and going to a language service provider that has all of its interpreters in India or Costa Rica or somewhere else. But, interpreters around the world need work too. So maybe the solution would be to have the same standards apply to all interpreters. Maybe the foreign stationed
Mhm.
interpreters should be able to sit for the national certification exams here, and that should be a requirement. I don't know. What do you think should happen looking forward?
Excuse me. I do agree with what you're saying. The path it will, most things will be solved with education and credentialing, right? So it doesn't matter where you are. It will be lovely. Wouldn't it be lovely that no matter where you are, you get an interpreter that knows the same ethic, that knows the same standards of practice, that
Yeah.
knows the process of a simultaneous, a consecutive note taking, and all that, right? So and that standardizing can only happen through education. And my wish, my dream, even right now, as I stand putting together my school of interpretation and looking forward at what I can do for my profession, my wish is that we can level up both the professional and the educational claim for all interpreters.
Mhm.
Right? But there should not be big gaps in terms of the education that one interpreter has, another has, or the income or the advantages that one interpreter has and other interpreter has in a different setting. It should not be that, right? my wish is for that to end, so that we are all interpreters, that we can all be valued for the services that we provide without any distinction in terms of the setting. I've seen for so many years the great difference in working conditions, income, and professional advantage among interpreters. And I'm sure you have seen that too, right? And every time we have a different setting that comes into the light, and as a, as a setting where interpreters can serve and can thrive and help, the first thing that happens is that it kind of gets diluted into the whole spectrum of interpretation, when it should not be. An interpreter is an interpreter. An interpretation is interpretation. It doesn't matter where it happens. So my wish is to level up through, the education and the professionalization of our profession, of all interpreters, so that everyone can have a fulfilling and profitable career, so that everyone can make a living being an interpreter, so that everyone can enjoy this profession without running into burnout or into mental fatigue, and God knows all the things that we run into when we are working for long hours, when we are being underpaid, and when we are not given the recognition that we deserve. So that's my wish, and I think that in many ways everybody can work towards that. And even if you are not teacher, or if you're not training, as just being an interpreter, right, and taking care of your education and taking care of your professional development, starting with you, that is going to make a huge difference for everyone that comes after you. It's going to change everything for everyone that comes after you. I have had a wonderful career, a fulfilling career. I have supported my family being an interpreter, and there is no reason why every interpreter should have that option as well.
I agree completely. Not only have I been able to make a comfortable life for myself, but there have been, yes, some sad and difficult moments, but there have been such joyous moments that I've had the privilege to personally witness, and to know that I played a small part in getting all the right people together so that we had that joyous outcome for that patient. You can't purchase that feeling. You have to earn that feeling. And I agree completely that it's a two-step process. It's the professionalization of our profession, and it's the commitment to ongoing, continuing education that keeps things fresh, that keeps you on top of your game, that keeps you competitive, and that allows you to provide service at that standard that technology has a long way to go to be able to meet. And personally, I think we should help that technology evolve rather than ignore that technology. The same thing
Yes.
I said to interpreters that were fearful of video remote interpreting. I'm going to say to interpreters and translators that are fearful of the AI technology becoming enmeshed in the profession. You will still have jobs in your lifetime when AI's presence is increased. But those of you that know how to work it will have more opportunity than those of you who choose to ignore it. Just like the interpreters that didn't want to work on video still were able to work with in-person assignments. But when COVID hit, who got the jobs? The ones that had trained and knew how to provide service remotely were ready when the landscape shifted, right? So we have to be ready. We can't be reactive. We have to be proactive. And that's why what you said resonates so strongly with me. continuing education should just be part of your everyday life for your professional development. There is something going on, especially now, everywhere, online, in person, in your town, in your region, nationally, through other organizations outside the US. There's really no excuse. You have lots of options now compared to when we were getting started. So take advantage of them. And there's lots of free opportunities as well. So I encourage folks to visit your website and also to visit ncihc.org. What your membership buys access to all the Home for Trainers webinars that offer continuing education credits. And the On the Road webinar work group offers free webinars with no requirements for membership. Keep you informed of what's happening in language access. So please join your local regional organization, join the National Council, go online and check out Catalina's site, Magna Voce, and stay in touch. There's so many groups on Facebook for interpreters. It's good to have that support. If you're an independent contractor rather than a staff interpreter, you don't have a gang of interpreters to go have coffee with on your break, but you do have a gang of fellow interpreters on social media that you can regularly interact with, check terminology with. So many really good, informative groups on that platform. Get involved with your own career and with the profession. That's how, what's the expression? A rising tide raises all the boats, right? And
Right. That's a
each of
beautiful
us
metaphor.
doing a little bit, a drop here, a drop there, it all adds up. I want to see our profession of spoken language interpreter reach parity with ASL interpreters in terms of what hourly rates are offered to them. So we can do this.
Yes. Yes. And as I said, it all starts with you, right? It doesn't matter where you are, in what setting you are interpreting, right? Advocating for yourself and for what you do is the first step. And preparing yourself to be able to answer questions that are asked sometimes about what we do and how we do it, right? Really understanding our code of ethics, really understanding our standards of practice so that you can be a good example of what a professional interpreter is and get that recognition that many times we don't have in our daily work.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Catalina. Thank you so much for being with us today. And all of you out there, stay tuned for another exciting podcast coming from the National Council directly to you out there. And we'll see you all soon. Ciao, ciao.
Bye, everybody.